Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us. I'm Ariane from from the ESDC Working Group, which consists of my colleagues Chris, Jamie, Maddie, and Aaron. We're looking forward to discussing the major issues we have identified in Canada's procurement system and providing you with our advice into your work on developing an overall plan. Next slide. Canadians depend on the federal government to deliver quality services, but growing attention to problems associated with high risk, high value procurements is eroding public trust and confidence in government. Urgent change through short-term actions and a whole of government review is needed to improve accountability, transparency, and positive outcomes for Canadians to restore public confidence. Based on a 2023 and 2024 Canada Trust Index, two-thirds of Canadians believe that the government is essential to providing services, yet only 37% trust the government to be competent and effective. The Procurement Ombuds 2023 report similarly drew attention to the negative impact of mismanaged public procurement on public trust. Something must be done to bridge this gap and deliver the services Canadians deserve and expect from their government. It is clear that public procurement is underperforming, and this is reflecting poorly on the government as a whole. It is vital that we act now because a healthy procurement system means delivering quality services to Canadians. Next slide. Public procurement is a complex process, and in an increasingly digital world, procurement has become synonymous with IT. First, the federal government spent approximately $4.6 billion in 2021-22 on IT contracts across core public service departments and agencies, which accounts for nearly a third of all contracts. In 2022, spending on IT more than doubled within 5 years. Second, federal procurement staff generally don't have the necessary expertise in technology and project management. Experts have been advocating for more in-house IT expertise since the mid-2000s, yet most departments still outsource. The Auditor General's calls for mandatory training on complex IT projects have largely gone ignored since 2018. Recent strides have been made to improve this, but much more needs to be done. Third, governments across the globe struggle with similar challenges, as evidenced by a US consulting firm's findings that large software projects succeed only 8% of the time, compared to 70% for smaller projects. Finally, many recent and anticipated projects are raising concerns. More than half of all IT projects are over budget and behind schedule. This is a highly contentious topic in the media right now, following the recent ArriveCAN app controversy, which raised concerns about the government's overspending and ability to manage contracts and support Canadians. Here at ESDC, we're sounding the alarms. We must get to the root causes of mismanagement on large projects, for example, with our own BDM program, which was launched in 2017. The BDM program, if mishandled, would impact over 10 million Canadians who currently rely on EI, OAS, and CPP benefits. However, the BDM program is also a chance for the government to showcase improved planning and execution of large IT projects. Next slide. Based on our recent experience here at ESDC, working on a massive modernization project, and through our consultations with many subject matter experts, we believe the three most pressing issues are accountability, culture, and capacity. Leadership and procurement officers alike must take ownership of their projects and be responsible at all stages of the procurement process. There is currently a workplace culture within procurement which can lead to complacency and tends to reduce accountability, as well as skill and knowledge gaps, which may reduce overall performance. Procurement today can lead to a race to the bottom for the lowest price rather than a quality product, and there isn't a clear vision of the desired outcomes for Canadians. nor are procurement officers experienced enough in complex projects involving IT to conceptualize what must be purchased in order to achieve those outcomes. Next slide. To adhere to the ESDC mandate, and with the mandates of central agencies and other departments, we have aligned all components of our recommendation with the key guiding principles seen here. To improve outcomes for Canadians, procurement processes and staff must center values of accountability, transparency, cost, and time efficiency. Next slide.
Our working group at ESDC has taken these guiding principles and used them to develop a procurement action plan. The initial research of our working group has developed the approach presented on screen. Alternative approaches are available in the appendix. The center of this plan is the Deputy Minister's Table. This table, composed of senior deputy ministers at key agencies and departments involved in complex IT procurements, is the center of the plan. More details on the center. We will also ensure that we have a clear communication strategy that engages with both external and internal partners and stakeholders, and our communication strategy will take a targeted approach to ensure that the main concerns of specific groups are directly addressed. Having this table puts the onus on deputy ministers to authorize a set of optional immediate actions, as well as a mission-oriented review of the federal procurement system. Next slide, please. Knowing that this is an issue that senior officials want to get a hold of, we have developed 3 actionable options that can be implemented in the short term. The DM-Peer Working Group provides a setting for deputy ministers from departments and agencies involved in complex and high-risk IT procurements to come together, discuss common issues, offer advice, and share information. This setting provides a forum for knowledge transfers and demonstrates that integrity in procurement is being placed at the highest level of authority. We've also identified that tightening internal controls as another immediately actionable option and would centralize accountability and help avoid overspending. This could be accomplished by having the Deputy Minister Table review and adjust approval authority of complex projects, the authority needed to sign off on sole source contracts, or address the delegated spending authority of high-risk procurements in favor of approval from more senior levels. Finally, we also recommend expanding the use of procurement facilitators. A key element to come out of Shared Services Canada's Agile Procurement Process 3.0 was the use of facilitators to communicate between vendors and government. We have identified this as an opportunity to foster transparent and service-centered procurements by establishing communication channels where the needs of projects are clearly defined and understood by both parties. Next slide, please. Here we have highlighted the timeline for a recommended action plan. The DM peer group and tighter internal controls are items that can be operationalized very quickly. The DM peer group can be established almost immediately and can run from the duration of the 24 months of the action plan and beyond if necessary. Tighter internal controls can also be operationalized relatively quickly. These measures will be subject to review after 60 months to evaluate the effectiveness and decide which of these items needs to be continued. Finally, we recognize that it will take time to recruit procurement facilitators and assign them to specific projects. That is why this element of our plan, of our proposed action plan, will begin in month 8. To track the use of these facilitators, our approach recommends that the number of facilitators assigned to assisting progress is consistently tracked over the course of the action plan. Next slide, please. We are now moving on to the review element of our proposed action plan. Here at ESDC, we are aware that the issues of procurement system have been an item that the Clerk of the Privy Council has discussed with the Prime Minister. With this in mind, we are supportive of a whole-of-government approach that delivers an actionable and mission-oriented review. At the top of our proposed structure is the Clerk of the Privy Council, who will sponsor this review. The Secretary of the Treasury Board will be responsible for calling the table of deputy ministers and take on a key role as chair of this table. The role of the Deputy Minister Table for the review will be to establish a steering committee and provide active and ongoing insight. The steering committee, made up of select assistant deputy ministers from relevant program, policy, procurement, IT areas, is responsible for the actions of the steering committee, reporting the actions of the steering committee to the clerk through the chair. The steering committee will be responsible for calling the establishments of working groups and determine the topics these working groups will study. The working groups will be made up of subject matter experts, managers, directors, and will be mandated to operationalize the study topics selected by the steering committee. Our working group has also recognized the value that partners play in the review. Our structure proposes that they are involved at all levels of the review, providing their expertise and insights to all levels of leadership. To summarize, at the bottom of the page, you can see our targeted approach. Our approach lies on a whole of government approach, relying on senior leadership, mobilizing internal expertise, assessing key issues and themes, and targeted recommendations and action planning. Next slide, please. Here we have highlighted the timeline to implement our review. Our working group believes that through rigorous project management, this review process can be delivered within 2 years. The proposed review structure will take place over 24 months, with individual reports discussing lessons learned to be provided at months 8, 16, and 24. These 8-month reports will be taken on by working groups who will study key issues, opportunities, and what actions need to be done. These reports will provide senior leaders with tangible outcomes every 8 months, with a cumulative report coming at the end of 2 years. In our proposed structure, a final report will be delivered no later than 24 months and will provide actionable recommendations that can springboard to more service-driven procurements. Next slide, please. On this slide, we have highlighted the themes, topics, and issues from our experiences here at ESDC that are important for matters that to be considered for the review. Our attempt at populating this work package is our best estimate of what topics logically fit at each stage and ensures a manageable workload for the working groups. The first 8 months, in our view, is that topics should focus on issues and elements of the problems we have identified in the initial research. These include current roles, responsibilities, and assessing failure points. In the second stage, we feel this is an excellent opportunity to explore opportunities to improve the procurement system. These include modernization and digitization initiatives, innovation and sustainability, and emerging enablers. I will note the column on the most right is distinguished as the nature of the proposed structure is that in the final 8 months, the work will be focused on lessons learned from the first 2 reports, with concrete recommendations and action planning. Once again, this is just our best estimate from an ESDC's perspective on what should be included, and these items are subject to adjustment based on the needs of other departments and agencies. Next slide.
For our budget strategy, we emphasize the importance of accountability because of the timeline and mission-oriented approach that was asked of us. Although we are representatives of ESDC, we created a budget that reflects a whole of government strategy. Due to the many departments involved, funds should be coordinated through central departments such as the TBS. We created an estimated budget that provides a general outline of anticipated costs and expenses, while also acknowledging that we cannot fully predict costs as the review progresses and provides findings that will inspire additional initiatives. We have also included funds to account for backfilling in human resources as our review and actions emphasize the utilization of internal expertise. For the DM table, we have allocated $3 million in annual funding and a 2-year total of $6 million. Implementation costs for the DM table refer to operational costs and any initiatives or pilot projects that the table may introduce. We have allocated an annual budget of $2 million for the expansion of procurement facilitators employed by Shared Services Canada as a part of their Agile Procurement Process 3.0 initiative. These funds will cover employee salaries and benefits of up to 20 new facilitators that will be directed by the DM table. The anticipated total cost after 2 years is $4 million, and these costs may increase over time if there is increased demand for facilitators. For our proposed review structure, we have allocated $5 million annually with a 2-year total of $10 million. These funds reflect the cost of increasing capacity to conduct or compose review reports, consultations, surveys, investigations, and the incentivization of internal expertise or external public figures if needed. The total implementation cost for our short-term actions and our review is $10 million annually, with a 2-year total of $20 million. We anticipate approximately $5 million annually or $10 million total in offsets through the reallocation of already designated funding within departments. We at ESDC have already consulted with our Deputy Minister to identify funds that can be used to cover a significant portion of these implementation costs, and we encourage other departments to do the same. The budget should be revisited upon completion of the review. Next slide, please.
We have identified 4 risks for consideration and mitigation. Public and media scrutiny, value for money, and resistance to change have been identified as higher risk. Given that this is a high-profile item and one that has received a substantial amount of negative media attention, this places public and media scrutiny at high risk. This will be mitigated by consistent and tailored messaging, emphasizing values of fairness, openness, and transparency. The risk of not obtaining value for money is high, given the complexity of this problem. This will be mitigated by careful tracking of spending aligned with deliverables, defined guardrails, collaboration between departments, and utilization of internal expertise as much as possible. Again, due to the complexity of this issue, the risk of resistance to change within the public service is high. Effective change management strategies will be utilized, including adaptability and clear lines of communication, including desired end state. We have identified meeting deadlines as medium risk. While it has been identified that many projects risk running over their time limits, rigorous project management with early establishment of benchmarks and consistent monitoring will mitigate this, along with required reporting on progress. Next slide. 6 key stakeholders and partners and their anticipated reactions have been identified. Consultancy firms are likely to have a negative reaction given potential loss of future business, but this will be mitigated by a commitment to consultation and guest invitations for participation within the review at the DM table. Delivering positive outcomes for Canadians is our top priority, and thus the considerations of the Canadian public is of the utmost importance. Citizen engagement will be undertaken during the review, such as councils, surveys, discussion boards, and roundtables, to help rebuild trust. Emphasis will be placed on the benefits of a procurement system that works for all Canadians. The relationship with Indigenous business partners must be prioritized. Meaningful consultation and partnership with Indigenous businesses will be expanded, and participation from Indigenous Services Canada at the DM table will ensure collaboration on top priorities. Industry groups, such as Tech Nation, may have a potentially mixed reaction. This will be mitigated by constant consultation during the review process and guest invitations at the DM table. The Government of Canada must also ensure that the voices of small businesses are heard and valued during any efforts to improve procurement. We will emphasize our commitment to fairness, openness, and support for small business owners across the country. Last, PSAC and public servants may have a potentially mixed reaction. We plan to engage with union representatives as well as directly with employees and ensure clear and constant communication, early and often. Next slide. Communication will be key to the success of these initiatives, and we plan to undertake tailored communication strategies internally with the government and externally with both vendors and the Canadian public. Internally, we will emphasize that we are committed to fostering a culture of an efficient and effective public service that works for everyone. The time to act is now, and this is a whole of government approach. We know that the status quo is no longer working for public servants who work tirelessly to deliver for Canadians. Externally, to vendors, we will emphasize the importance of our shared relationship. We will work together to improve this relationship and produce positive outcomes that will benefit both Canadians and the business community. When communicating with Canadians, it is important to demonstrate that we are taking strong and decisive action to address a known problem. This will be done through immediate and meaningful steps. Canadians depend on quality service delivery for things like their pension or employment insurance, and we commit to delivering on time and on budget. And in the end, our goal is to regain the trust of all Canadians. Next slide. On behalf of the ESDC Working Group, thank you and merci for your time. We are happy to answer any questions you may have for us on our plan to deliver accountable procurement for all Canadians through a DM table, strong and immediate action, and a comprehensive review. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And a comprehensive examination of the issues, and we appreciate that very much. We do have some questions, and I think we've got about 10 minutes for that. Michelle, I might ask you please to begin, and we'll follow on from there.
Sure. So great presentation. Thank you very much for that. Maybe we could kind of begin at the beginning. So you listed some issues at the beginning of your presentation that you are trying to, I guess, address or focus on. So I think it was accountability, culture, and capacity. And I'm wondering how you selected those. So were there others that you thought of? Was there an issues analysis? What did you think was particularly important about these and why you chose them as opposed to others?
Thank you. Yes, I will take that question. So we identified accountability, capacity, and culture both through our research, through our jurisdictional scan, and as well through meetings with our subject matter experts who were very crucial in informing that opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Philippe, I'm wondering if you've got some questions, please.
Yes,
Question.
thank you. Thank you for a very thorough presentation. You mentioned in your presentation that delivering positive outcomes for Canadians is your top priority. Your department is responsible for delivering key programs and services to Canadians like old age security, EI, Canada Student Loan Program, the Youth Employment Strategy. So when you were developing your approach and providing your advice to us, how did you take in consideration the fact that procurement is a key tool in making sure that we achieve better results for Canadians? So I'm just interested to know how this approach will deliver better results and what are the key risks that you have considered in your approach in making sure that this process is not gonna be an impediment to achieving better outcomes.
I could speak to that if you were able to turn to page 10, please. So in order to ensure that outcomes are actually delivered to Canadians, we have taken a review approach and a structure that is able to identify key failure points and issues in those procurement processes that impede delivering the services that you mentioned to Canadians. So we believe with our structure, we'll be able to identify what those common failure points are and assess them rigorously and be able to turn them into actionable items that result in delivering better services to Canadians.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to kind of jump on your second part there. You kind of had a two-part question, and I'll touch on the risks that you asked about. So if you'd like to turn to slide 13, please. Great, thank you. So we identified public and media scrutiny, value for money, resistance to change, and meeting deadlines as risks. We all know that this is a complex problem, and we need to be, realistic and smart about what those risks are. But as Chris mentioned, we account for, guardrails, things like deliverables and reporting mechanisms to ensure that we're meeting those deadlines and mitigating those risks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Patrick, I know you've got a neat question probably lined up.
Yeah, actually, thanks for the presentation. That was really good. A lot of thinking on this, and my interest is on the vendors and the role industry play in supporting the improvement of the procurement process. And I see you've covered that quite well. So I'm just going to go slightly off this topic and have interest to understanding. There's lots of emphasis and hope for the facilitator role in actually improving the success and outcome. I guess I'd be interested to know if you can expand on this, on how this facilitator used as part of APP 3.0 would support a better outcome and better success, and then how you measure that success rate when using a facilitator versus not using them.
Yeah, I could definitely speak to that. If you could please navigate to slide 7. Just give it a second here. Thank you. So yeah, the facilitator is an element that we saw from SCC's Procurement Process 3.0 that we thought was a particularly exciting opportunity. The role of the facilitators here is really to act as a key conduit between the vendor and the government. In our research and our scope of the issue, we have seen that oftentimes there are a lot of risks and costs that need to be identified at the front of the project that cannot necessarily be fully kind of planned out during the process. So the role of the facilitator would be able to help clear lines of communication and be very transparent about what these risks and potential impediments are. And we foresee through the role of these facilitators that be able to have really clear lines of communication to scope those risks and issues. And in terms of speaking to your second part of your question in regards to how exactly we're going to measure the use of the facilitators, one key indicator we would like to see implemented is we're proposing implementing rather, is that they track the number of these procurement facilitators, what programs they're helping, and the number number of programs that they're helping.
Okay, thank you, Chris. That's useful.
Thank you. All right, Ron, please.
Thank you. So sticking with the immediate action, so you clearly identified areas where actions can be taken to improve things in the short term. What do you see as the key risks to actually being able to achieve these immediate outcomes, and what steps would you suggest to mitigate those risks?
In regards to I'll keep going. In regards to the key miss in terms of the immediate short-term actions, it would really be in terms of a kind of the time for this approach. So recognizing that this is an important issue, there could be some change management resistance throughout the organization, but we really feel that just with the scope and the size of this issue and the communication that's been had at the very top, that that is something that can be mitigated through very rigorous project planning and project management.
Thank you.
All right, leaving Donna, please, final set of questions.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm going to just focus on your DM group because I know it was central to the immediate actions. One of the things I'm interested in, of course, you choosing the whole of government approach, which means you've integrated other players. What would you say to the feasibility of this with the fact that current structures are siloed? And even you also had, like, for example, the KPIs. How do you see that working when the KPIs are usually centralized distributed for each department? So again, it's that reconciliation of whole of government versus you've got the group, the peer group with a number of people, but there's siloed approach that still exists.
Yes, thank you very much. Can we turn to, I believe it is page 9. Yeah, so just to reiterate kind of the structure here, I really appreciate that question. In terms of how, especially the KPIs and how we're going to measure the elements of the review, we believe that should be items at the very early stages of the working groups to determine what exactly measures would be successful for tracking the use of the report. So one overall performance indicator for the review process is ensuring there's on-time publishes of this review, but we do recognize that with this whole of government approach strategy, everybody needs to come together and put the work in to identify the exact ways we can track and implement the elements from the review.
Thank you.
Okay. Listen, I might have one just kind of quick one. It was about the budget. You suggested that you had costs that were primarily FTE based. Is that correct? And I know that you had allocated some costs at the deputy minister level, but those costs are essentially already covered. So I just wanted to know what your precise thinking was there.
Yeah, so specifically for the DM table, those costs refer to operational costs and potentially introducing initiatives or pilot projects based on the findings of the review or their findings in their discussions. And would you mind explaining just a little bit what you meant by FTE? Sorry, I think I might have misheard you.
Well, the HR cost, the full-time equivalent cost. So essentially the labor cost. So we're already paying our deputy ministers. There
Oh,
wouldn't be
yes.
an incremental cost associated with that. But what you've just said is that it really is about the operating support. What sort of support were you anticipating there?
In terms of So the funding support is primarily, again, to help to fund specific initiatives that the DM table may wish to introduce as part of their discussion as a DM peer group and as the review findings are published, and any the acquiring of any internal expertise for support as they see fit.
Okay, excellent.
Thank
you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, team, for all of your advice. We have to prepare for another panel, and we hope to see you again.